the anatomy of the spine. So I'm going to be looking at this incredibly beautiful drawing that comes from Gino Barczay's Anatomy for the Artist. I think of it as the big yellow book, and we'll have this in the classroom, and I'll have a scan of it as well on Moodle. This book is dense, beautifully drawn, but we are going to kind of do a summation of the information that's in this book. All right. The spine. The key idea with the spine is dynamic equilibrium. And what I mean by that is that the spine is made up of a double S-curve. You can see that really beautifully in this illustration. So it's kind of a backwards S and then another S. So we're looking at if this person is facing the right, and another S. And this is like a giant spring in the back, so that these forms, when they are at rest, are able to move in multiple directions, are able to carry weight. And you can imagine if the spine was just straight up and down, any kind of impact would be pretty damaging, right? Or any kind of quick movement. In this case, you can imagine it's like it can kind of tighten up or spread out, stretch out, however you imagine. So there are 24 total vertebrae. The vertebrae are the individual bones in the spine. Within that, there are 7 cervical vertebrae, cervical meaning neck. Here, it's the vertebrae of the neck. There are 12 thoracic vertebrae. Thoracic, T-H-O-R-A. C-I-C, thoracic vertebrae. And there are 5 lumbar vertebrae. So 5 large bones of the lower back. The 12 thoracic vertebrae all connect to a rib of the rib cage. So there are 12 bones in the rib cage on either side, and each of the 2 bones connect to those thoracic vertebrae. Most of the movement that you see in the spine happens in the cervical and the lumbar vertebrae. The thoracic vertebrae mostly straighten just a little bit and then expand and contract as we breathe, take deep breaths. But most of the movement of the spine happens in the first and the last set of bones. And then you have below that the sacrum. The bones of the sacrum are fused into one immobile bone. The vertebrae, the bones of the vertebrae from the front view, kind of wide at the top, narrow just a little bit, and then get wide again. And between each vertebrae is a cartilage disc. So if you ever know anyone, or if you yourself have ever had disc issues, those are the discs they're talking about. They're kind of like a stiff cartilage, kind of like a and these cartilage discs can contract or be compressed in different directions. So you can imagine if you're bending to the side or bending forward, you can have a disc. Looks kind of like this. See, someone is bending to the side. And a little bit of compression all the way down the spine, you can imagine, can account for a lot of movement. All right, so I'm going to draw the spine on the side here, and then we'll make some shape diagrams. So I'm going to start with just that really beautiful S curve. So kind of short bend forward. The fullness of the thoracic spine, thoracic vertebrae. And the strong rebend, backwards bend of the lower spine. And the small kind of coda, the end, in the sacrum. And I'm going to draw the spinal column here, so that stack of kind of disc shapes and vertebrae. Giving myself kind of a shape to follow, a template to follow. And then I'm going to count these off. So I need to get to 7. 12. So the middle of this might be about here. So 1 through 6, 7 through 12. And then 1 through 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can see I've laid out the 7 and then 12 and then 5 vertebrae of the spinal column. The 7th cervical vertebrae is important, and I've kind of made that a little bit more apparent. I'm going to put a little star there. That's really where the back of the neck becomes the back of the back, kind of the top of the shoulders. And you can feel that really prominently. If you feel the back of your neck, kind of right where a necklace would sit, you can feel the kind of spiny bone there. That's also where a number of different muscles kind of begin and end. So that seventh cervical vertebrae is really crucial. All right, now let's talk about how the spine moves. And there's these really wonderful dynamic illustrations in the second page of the section on the spine in Barksay's Anatomy for Artists, so kind of looking at and for the artist book. And what I love about it is kind of helps you understand where the movement is in the spine. So if someone's head is tilting back, they're doing kind of a back bend, like a yoga pose. Got their chin facing up. Most of that movement is happening in the cervical vertebrae in the neck. The thoracic vertebrae holds on to a little bit of that inward or that backwards curve. And then the lumbar vertebrae still bend backwards. It's the sacrum. See the hip bone kind of sitting in front. Someone is standing upright, got that double S curve. Even in someone who feels like they're standing totally straight, has that curve in the back. And then someone leaning forward. And looking down at their feet. Cervical vertebrae is almost straight. Still have a bit of that recurve in the thoracic. And that curve in the sacrum. So someone who's really stretching out and leaning forward. That S-curve of the spine, if we were to kind of do a little simple diagram of the trunk, we've got the head, so the ball of the cranium, the jaw, the curve of the neck, holding that head up, the weight of the skull. We've got that backwards tilting egg shape, the rib cage. And that backwards tilting egg kind of like nestles into the curve of the thoracic vertebrae. So those two shapes fit together really beautifully. The recurve of the lumbar spine, and the backwards curve of the sacrum, and the hips, hip bone, the pelvis fits within that. And if we look at the torso from the front, we can imagine that rib cage as it tilts say to the left. So we're making a tilted egg shape. Finding that midline of the rib cage, that kind of narrower at the top, a little wider at the bottom. Say someone is leaning to the left, but their hips are staying straight up and down. Kind of angled. Pubic symphysis there. The two bones of the pelvis meet, the arch of the pelvic bones going back, sacrum here, sit bones. Most of that turning is happening in the lumbar spine. So the vertebrae of the thoracic column stay level to each other. And what this can mean in terms of what the muscles are doing is that muscles on this side of the body might really stretch out, the muscles that go from the side of the rib cage to the side of the pelvis, that external oblique, that might really stretch, and it might actually kind of compress on this side. So you might actually see the body kind of bunching up. Well, you will see the body kind of bunching up on one side where that movement is happening and stretching out on the other side. All right.